In the world of car manufacturing, winning is usually all about horsepower, luxury, and the latest tech. But this is the story of a company that took that rulebook, threw it out the window, and won with a completely different, radically simple idea. This is how a 50 million euro bet on a forgotten factory from the communist era turned into one of the biggest success stories in automotive history.
So if I asked you to name the best-selling car in Europe, what would you guess? You'd probably think of a reliable German sedan, maybe a cutting-edge Japanese hybrid, or, a sleek American EV. But for the last couple of years, you'd actually be wrong on all counts. The top spot belongs to a brand most people outside of Europe have probably never even heard of.
And this slide right here shows you just how huge of an upset this was. You had the Volkswagen Golf, an absolute icon, as the undisputed king for 14 straight years. And then, out of nowhere, it gets dethroned by this, the Dacia Sandero, a no-frills budget car from Romania. So the big question for this whole explainer is pretty simple. How in the world did that happen?
To get the answer, we have to rewind the clock all the way back to 1966, in communist Romania. The government set up a company, later named Dacia, with a very simple mission: build a car that people could actually afford. They got their start making licensed versions of Renaults, like the Dacia 1300, which basically became the car for an entire generation of Romanians.
But then the Berlin Wall fell, and Dacia's protected little world came crashing down. Suddenly, the market was flooded with much better used cars from the West. Dacia's own designs were hopelessly out of date, and their shot at a new model, the Nova, was a total dud. By the late 90s, the company was basically on life support.
The big turning point came in 1999. Renault, Dacia's old partner, stepped in and bought the company for the mind-bogglingly low price of just 50 million euros. I mean, that's pocket change in the car industry. But this wasn't some charity case. It was all driven by a powerful idea from Renault's chairman, Louis Schweitzer, an idea that sparked from one simple observation.
Okay, so picture this. Schweitzer is on a trip to Russia, and he sees these old, super basic Lada cars selling for 6,000 euros flying out of the showrooms. Meanwhile, his own modern, 12,000 euro Renaults are just gathering dust. It was a total aha moment. He realized there was this massive, untapped market for a car that was modern and reliable, but most importantly, radically affordable. That idea became a project called X90, which we now know as the Dacia Logan.
Now, to pull this off, Renault brought a completely revolutionary method to Dacia. See, normally you design a car and then you figure out how much it costs to build. They flipped that whole process on its head. It's called design to cost. The final price isn't the result, it's the starting point. It's the law, and every single engineering choice has to fit within that number.
All right, let's get into the weeds here, because this is how they actually built the impossible car. This is the secret sauce, the Dacia formula, that gives them a built-in 15% cost advantage over pretty much everyone else.
The process was just brutally simple. First, that 5,000 euro price tag was set in stone, non-negotiable. Second, instead of designing expensive new parts, engineers were told to go shopping in the Renault parts bin. They had to use proven components that had already paid for themselves. And third, they got rid of anything and everything that added complexity but didn't add essential function.
Now this is where it gets really interesting. Schweitzer himself calls it a Frankenstein car. The axles and door handles, ripped straight from a Clio. The air vents, from an S-Boss. Even the windscreen was made flat because it's way cheaper to produce than curved glass. And get this, the side mirrors are identical, so they only needed one mold instead of two. The result? A car with 50% fewer parts than a similar Renault, which makes it cheaper to build and way easier to fix. Genius.
And here's a wild piece of trivia for you. When the legendary Carlos Ghosn took over as CEO of Renault, he saw Dacia as a distraction and was this close to shutting the whole thing down. It was only after the Logan launched and became a massive hit that everyone realized its value. Just think about it. One of Renault's most profitable ventures ever was almost killed before it even got started.
So the Logan wasn't some one-hit wonder. It was proof of concept. Dacia figured out pretty quickly that this formula could be used for almost any kind of car. And that led to a surprise attack on Western Europe, a market they never, ever intended to compete in.
Just look at this timeline. It's like watching a masterclass in market disruption. After the Logan in 2004, boom, you get the Sandero hatchback. Then in 2010, the Duster comes along and does for SUVs what the Logan did for sedans.
It made them affordable for millions of people. Then they did it again in 2021 with the Spring, Europe's cheapest EV, and for 2025, they're jumping into the very profitable large SUV segment with the Bigster, Relentless.
So what does all this success look like in hard numbers? Well, look at this, 309,392. That's how many Dacia Sanderos were sold in 2024 alone. A staggering number that, against all odds, made it the best-selling car in all of Europe.
And this success has just kept building. Since that relaunch in 2004, they've sold over 2 million Logans, more than 2.5 million Dusters, and by 2025, they blew past the incredible milestone of 10 million total cars sold. This wasn't a fluke, it was a revolution.
Okay, so Dacia is king of the hill right now. But you know what they say, staying on top is the hard part. There are new challenges everywhere, especially from low-cost Chinese EV makers and, of course, the huge pressure to go electric. So how are they going to defend the crown?
This chart lays out their defense plan perfectly. Against this new wave of Chinese brands, Dacia has 3 huge advantages. First, their factories are in Europe, so they avoid big import tariffs. Second, they have a massive, ready-made dealer and service network in 44 countries. And maybe most important of all, they have over 20 years of brand trust, and that's something you just can't buy overnight.
Their game plan for the future is called Future Ready, and it's pretty ambitious. The goal? By 2030, 2/3, 2 out of every 3 Dacias sold will be electrified. That is a massive jump, but they plan on doing it without ever losing sight of their #1 rule, affordability. So, here's the roadmap. They're going to launch 4 new EV models, including one priced under 18,000 euros. That's a classic Dacia move. They're also pushing deeper into that more profitable C segment with cars like the Bigster. And yes, even their champion, the Sandero, is getting a next-gen version with a fully electric option. They are literally applying their winning formula to the electric age. So when you step back, the Dacia story leaves us with this one fascinating question. It proved that even in one of the most brand-obsessed industries on the planet, a relentless focus on what's essential can beat decades of marketing about what's aspirational. And it really makes you wonder, where else is that true? Which industry is next?